let's learn English together. Today, we are going to learn about the poem The Living Photograph by Jackie Kay. This poem is about the relationship between the persona and her grandmother. Although her grandmother had already passed away, the persona reminisced about the time they spent together from the photograph that she took with her grandmother when she was a child. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to recite the poem with the correct pronunciation and intonation. Explain the structure and summary of the poem. Describe the persona, setting, tone, and mood of the poem. And lastly, you should be able to list down the themes and moral values of the poem. To start off, let's listen to the poem being read. The Living Photograph by Jackie Kay. My small grandmother is tall there. Straight back, white broderie anglais shirt, pleated skirt, flat shoes, gray bun, a kind old smile round her eyes. Her big hand holds mine, white hand in black hand. Her sharp blue eyes look her own death in the eye. It was true after all that look. My tall grandmother became small. Her back round and hunched. Her soup forgot to boil. She went to the awful place grandmothers go, somewhere unknown, unthinkable. But there she is still, in the photo with me at 3. The crinkled smile is still living, breathing. Before we analyze the meaning of the poem, let's look at the poem's structure. If you look closely, you will see that the poem is written in 3 stanzas, consisting of 16 lines. There are 7 lines in stanza 1, 6 lines in stanza 2, and 3 lines in stanza 3. There is no rhyme scheme in the poem. It is written in free verse. The poem is presented in a narrative style from the first-person point of view. This means that it is written from the poet's point of view or perspective. In this poem, the persona was looking at a photograph of her and her grandmother when she was a child. This brought back the memories that they had together. It also reminded her of how her grandmother looked like when she was alive and healthy. Even though her grandmother had passed away, she still felt her grandmother's presence when she looked at the photo. Now let us study the summary for each stanza. In stanza 1, the persona was describing her grandmother's appearance in the photograph. In the photo, her grandmother looked tall and her back was straight. She wore a white embroidered shirt with a pleated skirt and flat shoes, typical for a woman of her age. She pulled her gray hair back into a bun. She also smiled kindly as she held the persona's hand in hers. In this stanza, the persona described this moment with the line, white hand in black hand. This means that the persona may have come from a mixed-race family. In the last line, the persona described her grandmother as a courageous woman since she had no fear of death. In stanza 2, the look on her grandmother's face when she was expecting death proved to be true. As her grandmother got older, she became smaller and shorter. Her back was hunched due to her old age. her once strong grandmother became a fragile old lady who was also forgetful. In the end, her grandmother passed away. As a child, the persona described death as an unknown and unthinkable place. In stanza 3, the persona told the reader she could feel her grandmother's presence every time she looked at the photo. She was constantly reminded of her memories with her grandmother when she was 3 years old. To her, her grandmother was still much alive and smiling at her. So, who is the persona in this poem? In my opinion, the persona is most likely the poet herself. As I mentioned before, the poem is presented in the first-person point of view, which means it must be from the poet's point of view or perspective. So we can predict that the poem is based on her personal experience with her grandmother. The setting of this poem can be divided into 2 parts, which are time and place. For the time setting of this poem, we can assume that the poem was most likely written when the persona was already a grown-up. As she looked at the photograph, she recalled her childhood memories with her grandmother. As for the place setting, we can assume that the setting for this poem took place in Britain or Scotland, where the poet grew up. We can also assume that the persona was most likely at her family home browsing at old photographs. The general tone and mood for this is rather nostalgic. In the first stanza, the persona described her grandmother and recalled the sweet memories that they had together. The second stanza, on the other hand, changed to a serious tone with a hint of fear as the persona recalled how growing old made her grandmother fragile and weak till her death. However, the poem ended with a positive tone as the persona was comforted by the smiling picture of a grandmother and the memories which she cherished. The theme is the underlying message or the big idea. It is the belief that the author tries to convey in the writing. This belief or idea surpasses cultural barriers. It is usually universal in nature. When a theme is universal, it touches on the human experience, regardless of race or language. There are several themes highlighted in this poem. Let's study all of them. The first theme of this poem is the everlasting quality of a photograph. A photograph immortalizes a person or a moment. What is captured in a photograph will remain alive forever. Looking at old photographs can also bring back many treasured memories, especially of loved ones. And in this case, the photograph has brought back the persona's memories of her late grandmother. Although the persona's grandmother has since passed away, she is always alive and well to her. To her, this is the image of her grandmother that she will remember for the rest of her life. And in addition, a photograph also allows us to reflect and recall the past and enables us to relive our memories. The second theme of this poem is death is part of life. Death is part of life, and it's a cycle which everyone will experience at some point in their lives. This included the persona's grandmother. In this poem, the persona recalled how growing old affected her grandmother, who was once strong and healthy. She eventually fell ill and passed away. Thanks to the photograph, however, the persona was able to relive her memories with her grandmother for the rest of her life. The last theme of this poem is family bond. In general, the poem focuses on the relationship between the persona and her grandmother. The photograph showed the strong bond that they both shared, especially the part when the persona's grandmother held her hand as a child. Even though their skin color was not the same, they strongly loved each other. As the persona's grandmother became older and forgetful, the persona's love towards her never died. She would remember her grandmother as the sweet and lovable woman she saw in the photograph. Moral values are commonly accepted principles of life. It relates to the principles of right and wrong of a human character. It is also the standards of good and evil, which govern a person's behavior and choices. In literature, moral values are important lessons that we can apply in life. There are several moral values highlighted in this poem. Let's study all of them. The first moral value of this poem is we must treasure our loved ones while they are alive. Family and our loved ones are the most important thing in our life. For this reason, we must spend quality time with them while they are still alive. When they pass away, all that will be left are the memories that we shared together. The second moral value of this poem is we must try to accept that death is part of life. Dealing with the death of a loved one is really difficult. In this poem, the persona's grandmother passed away when she was young. Hence, she continued to remember her grandmother's death to this very day. However, she was fortunate to have the photograph of her sweet and kind-looking grandmother, which reminded her of the time that they shared together. The third moral value of this poem is we must value the importance of family relationships. We should always love and take care of our family and loved ones, especially our elders. When they are old and sick, it is our responsibility to take care of them. For this reason, we must look after our family and loved ones, or else we might regret our actions when they are not around anymore. The fourth moral value of this poem is unconditional love between grandchildren and grandparents. The love and bond between the persona and her grandmother is strong as she still remembers her departed grandparent. This reflects unconditional love that exceeds age, race, and distance. The difference in their age and their racial background did not affect their love towards each other. Even though the persona's grandmother had passed away, the distance between them does not change the fact that she will love and cherish her grandmother for the rest of her life. I hope you have learned new things from this video, and I hope to see you again. Till next time, bye-bye!